Have you ever been so humiliated in public, you wished the floor would swallow you whole? Chloe was just trying to enjoy a quiet birthday dinner when the cruelty of others shattered her night. She had no idea the most dangerous man in Chicago was watching from the shadows. Chloe Bennett checked her reflection in the gold-tinted mirror of the restaurant's foyer, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down the fabric of her dress. It was an emerald green velvet wrap dress she had spent half her monthly bonus on. She was a size 20. It was a fact she had spent the last 3 years trying to embrace through therapy and sheer willpower, despite the world's constant grating reminders that she didn't fit into its narrow, unforgiving mold. Tonight was her 28th birthday. After months of grueling 80-hour weeks working as a senior auditor for Deloitte in downtown Chicago, she had decided to step out of her comfort zone. She had made a reservation at the Wellington, a fiercely exclusive Michelin-starred establishment in the Gold Coast district known for its month-long waiting lists and elite clientele. She was also supposed to be on a date. A man named Chad from Bumble had promised her a night of celebration. Instead, she had been sitting at a corner table for an hour and 15 minutes. Chad's profile had mysteriously vanished from the app, and her messages were left on read. Swallowing the bitter lump of rejection in her throat, Chloe decided she wasn't going to let a cowardly man ruin her evening. She signaled the waiter and confidently ordered the seared scallops, a dry-aged ribeye, and a glass of robust Cabernet Sauvignon. She deserved to take up space. She deserved a good meal. But the universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Just as the sommelier poured her wine, the maitre d' escorted a new couple to the table directly adjacent to hers. Chloe froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her entirely numb. It was Greg Tanner. Greg was her ex-boyfriend from her early 20s, a junior partner at a ruthless corporate law firm, and the architect of her deepest insecurities. For 2 years he had monitored her caloric intake, weighed her portions, and made snide, passive-aggressive remarks about her thighs until she had finally found the courage to pack her bags and leave. Hanging off Greg's arm was a woman who looked like she had stepped off a runway. She was tall, impossibly slender, wearing a backless silk slip dress that clung to her zero body fat frame. Chloe immediately recognized her from Greg's social media, Lexi, a local real estate influencer. Chloe immediately looked down, hiding her face behind the menu, praying they wouldn't notice her. But the tables at the Wellington were notoriously intimate. "Oh my God, Greg, look!" Lexi's high-pitched, piercing voice sliced through the ambient jazz music playing in the dining room. She didn't even bother to lower her volume. "Is that the ex you told me about? The one who let herself go?" Greg turned, his perfectly styled hair catching the dim chandelier light. His eyes widened in recognition, quickly followed by a smirk of pure, unadulterated condescension. "Well, well, Chloe. Fancy seeing you here. Though I'm surprised they let you through the door. Didn't realize the Wellington started serving family-sized buffets." A few heads from nearby tables turned. Chloe felt a hot, prickling flush of shame creep up her neck and flood her cheeks. "Hello, Greg," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just having dinner. Please leave me alone." "Just having dinner?" Lexi scoffed, eyeing the warm bread basket and butter the waiter had just set down. "Honey, it looks like you're having dinner for 3. Where's your date? Wait, don't tell me. He saw you and ran." Lexi erupted into a shrill, mocking laugh. Greg joined in, shaking his head. "You always did have a problem with impulse control, Chloe. Honestly, I'm just concerned for your health. Eating a heavy meal at an hour like this. It's sad." Chloe's vision blurred with unshed tears. She gripped her linen napkin under the table, her knuckles turning white. She wanted to fire back, to tell them how successful she was, to tell them she loved herself, but the trauma of Greg's past emotional abuse had paralyzed her vocal cords. Things escalated when Chloe's appetizer arrived. The smell of the rich butter-seared scallops was intoxicating, but she suddenly felt physically sick. Lexi dramatically covered her nose. "Greg, I can't!" She whined loudly, ensuring the entire section of the restaurant could hear her. "I literally cannot eat my caviar with her sitting right there. It's disgusting. Watching someone that massive gorge themselves is making me lose my appetite. She's ruining the ambiance." A nearby couple, an older, wealthy-looking pair dripping in Cartier jewelry, nodded in agreement, casting disdainful glances at Chloe. Greg raised his hand, snapping his fingers aggressively. "Manager. We need the manager." Within seconds, Mr. Beaumont, the impeccably dressed, painfully snobbish general manager of the Wellington, appeared. He was a man who prided himself on catering to Chicago's old money. He knew Greg's father was a senior judge. "Mr. Tanner, is there a problem with the service?" Mr. Beaumont asked, bowing his head slightly. "Yes, Beaumont," Greg sneered, gesturing toward Chloe as if she were a piece of trash left on the carpet. "My fiancé is feeling nauseous. The sight of this woman gorging herself is highly offensive to the aesthetic of this establishment. We pay a premium to dine here. I want her moved out of our sight. Or better yet, removed." Chloe looked at Mr. Beaumont, silently pleading with him to be reasonable. "I am a paying customer," she whispered, a tear finally escaping and tracking down her cheek. "I haven't done anything wrong. It's my birthday." Mr. Beaumont's expression was cold, calculating. He weighed a single plus-sized woman sitting alone against the wealthy, influential Tanner family. The math was simple in his shallow world. He stepped over to Chloe's table, leaning in with a harsh, patronizing smile. "Miss, I must ask you to compromise. You are causing a disturbance to our VIP guests. I can have the kitchen box up your meal so you can eat it in the comfort of your own home. Or I can seat you in the back corridor, near the kitchen doors. But you cannot stay here." "A disturbance." Chloe gasped, her heart shattering into a million pieces. "I haven't spoken a word. They are the ones harassing me." "Keep your voice down, please." Mr. Beaumont hissed, his veneer of politeness cracking. "Mr. Tanner is a platinum patron. You are making a scene. I will give you 2 minutes to gather your things, or I will have security escort you out." Chloe sat completely frozen. The entire restaurant seemed to have stopped eating to watch her humiliation. Lexi was smirking, taking a sip of her champagne in victory. Greg looked incredibly pleased with himself. Chloe felt entirely, utterly worthless. She reached for her purse, her hands shaking violently, preparing to accept the unjust defeat and flee into the cold Chicago rain. Above the main dining floor, elevated on a mezzanine level, enclosed by tinted soundproof glass, sat Leo Moretti. To the Chicago Public and Forbes magazine, Leonardo Moretti was a mysterious, self-made billionaire with a massive portfolio in global shipping logistics and real estate. To the Chicago underworld, he was the undisputed head of the Moretti Syndicate, a man whose name was spoken in hushed, terrified whispers. He controlled the ports, the unions, and the shadows of the city with a cold, calculated ruthlessness. Tonight, Leo was wearing a bespoke, midnight blue Brioni suit. His dark hair was neatly styled, but his striking, sharp features carried the heavy, weary look of a man who rarely slept. Faint silver scars traced his knuckles, remnants of a violent past he had clawed his way out of. He was in the middle of a high-stakes, silent meeting with his underboss Dante. But for the last 10 minutes, Leo hadn't heard a single word Dante was saying. His piercing dark eyes were locked onto the dining floor below. Leo possessed an uncanny ability to read a room, a survival trait from his days on the streets. He had watched the beautiful curvy woman in the green velvet dress sit alone for an hour. He had admired her quiet dignity, the way the dress hugged her soft, lush curves, and the brave, defiant way she had ordered her meal anyway. To Leo, She looked like a Renaissance painting amidst a sea of plastic-starving socialites. Then he watched the tall, slicked-back lawyer and his skeletal companion arrive. He couldn't hear the exact words through the glass, but he didn't need to. He recognized the body language of a bully. He saw the woman in green shrink into herself. He saw the tears. When the manager Beaumont stepped in and clearly sided with the aggressors, something dark and deeply primal snapped inside Leo's chest. Leo had grown up in crippling poverty. He had been mocked, beaten, and cast aside by society's elite for the first 20 years of his life. If there was one thing Leo Moretti despised above all else, it was entitled people using their artificial power to crush the vulnerable. "Boss?" Dante asked, noticing Leo's terrifyingly still posture. "Is there a problem with the shipment?" Leo slowly stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. His jaw was clenched so tight, a muscle ticked in his cheek. "The shipment is fine, but there is trash in the dining room that needs to be taken out." Dante followed Leo's gaze. He let out a low whistle, immediately understanding. "Want me to handle it?" "No," Leo said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I'm going to handle it." When Leo Moretti descended the sweeping mahogany staircase into the main dining room, the atmosphere in the Wellington physically altered. The ambient chatter died down. Waiters paused mid-step. The sheer dominating aura of the man commanded absolute terrified respect. Chloe had just picked up her clutch, a tear splashing onto the leather, when a large, impeccably tailored figure stepped directly into her line of sight, blocking Mr. Beaumont. "Is there a problem here, Beaumont?" Leo's voice was smooth deep and carried a chilling authority that made the hairs on the back of Chloe's neck stand up. Mr. Beaumont spun around his face, instantly draining of all color. He knew exactly who Leo Moretti was. Everyone in Chicago's high society knew that stepping on Moretti's toes was career suicide, if not actual suicide. Furthermore, Beaumont knew that the holding company that owned the building the Wellington operated in was heavily funded by Moretti's capital. "Mr. Moretti," Beaumont stammered, his arrogant posture collapsing into pure sycophancy. No problem at all, sir. We were just relocating a guest who was disturbing the peace of our VIP section." Leo's dark eyes shifted to Greg and Lexi, pinning them with a stare so lethally cold that Lexi physically recoiled in her chair. "Disturbing the peace," Leo repeated softly. He looked down at Chloe. His expression softened infinitesimally as he took in her tear-stained face, her beautiful full lips, and the trembling of her hands. "She wasn't doing anything," Leo stated, turning his attention back to Beaumont, "except trying to eat her dinner while being verbally assaulted by this cheap dollar store suit and his plastic accessory." Greg bristled, his ego flaring, despite the obvious danger radiating from the massive man before him. "Excuse me, who the hell do you think you are? I am Gregory Tanner. My father is. I know exactly who your father is." Leo interrupted his voice, dropping an octave, slicing through Greg's bravado like a straight razor. "Judge Thomas Tanner, a man who owes my associates a considerable amount of gambling debt. Debt I have been gracious enough not to collect. Until tonight." Greg's face went chalk white. The arrogant sneer vanished, replaced by genuine, unadulterated terror. Lexi looked wildly between Greg and the terrifying stranger, realizing they had picked a fight in front of the apex predator of the city. "As for you, Beaumont," Leo continued, pulling a sleek, matte black smartphone from his breast pocket, "you clearly have a fundamental misunderstanding of hospitality." Leo dialed a number, putting it on speaker. It rang twice before a panicked voice answered. "Mr. Moretti, to what do I owe the pleasure?" It was Richard Hayes, the majority owner of the Wellington Restaurant Group. "Richard, I'm currently standing in the dining room of your flagship restaurant, Leo said smoothly, never breaking eye contact with the sweating manager. I'm buying out your entire 80% share of the establishment. Name your price. The wire transfer will clear in 10 minutes. The line was dead silent for a moment. Leo, my God, you want to buy the whole restaurant. Right now, I suppose. 30 million cerito. Done, Leo said without blinking. Have your lawyers send the paperwork to Dante. Oh, and Richard, as the new sole owner of this establishment, my first act is immediate. Leo ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Beaumont, Leo said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. You're fired. Clean out your locker. If I see you in this city's hospitality industry again, I will personally ensure you are scrubbing toilets in a dive bar on the south side. Beaumont looked like he might faint. He backed away, nodding frantically, completely stripped of his dignity. Leo then turned to Greg and Lexi. He snapped his fingers once. Immediately, two of Leo's men, massive, terrifying individuals in dark suits who had silently materialized from the shadows, stepped forward. Throw them out, Leo commanded, his tone dripping with disgust. Don't let them get their coats from the check-in. It's raining outside. Let them wash off some of their ugly personalities. Wait, you can't do this. My Birkin bag is in the cloakroom, Lexi shrieked, as one of the men grabbed Greg by the collar, hauling him out of his chair as if he weighed nothing. Take it up with management, Leo replied coldly. Oh, wait. I am management. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the wealthy, arrogant couple was dragged out of the dining room, Greg stumbling over his expensive shoes, completely humiliated. Once they were gone, the heavy, terrifying tension in the room seemed to evaporate. Leo took a deep, calming breath and turned his full attention to Chloe. She was staring at him, her beautiful eyes wide with shock, awe, and a hint of fear. Leo's demeanor transformed entirely. The ruthless mafia boss vanished, replaced by a true gentleman. He slowly approached her table, pulling out the chair opposite hers. May I? He asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle, like velvet over steel. Chloe swallowed hard, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Yes, thank you. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Leo said, sitting down and waving a hand. Instantly, a terrified new waiter rushed over, pouring them both fresh glasses of water and awaiting orders. Men like that survive because decent people stay quiet. You are a guest in my newly acquired establishment. It is my job to ensure you are treated with the respect you deserve. He leaned forward slightly, resting his scarred hands on the white linen tablecloth. I'm Leo, and I couldn't help but notice it looks like someone was foolish enough to stand you up on what appears to be a special occasion. It's my birthday, Chloe whispered suddenly, feeling overwhelmingly shy under his intense, completely focused gaze. I'm Chloe. Happy birthday, Chloe. Leo smiled, a genuine, breathtaking smile that reached his dark eyes. He looked at the waiter. Bring us your finest bottle of Bollinger champagne, the 2008 vintage, and tell the chef to prepare the Grand Wagyu tasting menu. Tonight, Chloe, we are going to celebrate properly, and I promise you, no one in this city will ever speak to you like that again. The next 6 months were a whirlwind that completely rewrote the reality of Chloe Bennett's life. Leo Moretti did not just enter her world, he enveloped it. He was a man of terrifying extremes. To the city of Chicago, he was a phantom of power, ruthlessly expanding his empire. But to Chloe he was fiercely protective, endlessly patient, and intoxicatingly devoted. He dismantled her insecurities brick by brick. When she hesitated to wear a swimsuit during their weekend getaway to Lake Geneva, Leo didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply looked at her with a raw, predatory hunger that made her blush all the way to her toes, whispering that she was the most breathtaking woman he had ever seen. He touched her curves with reverence, worshipping the very body society had told her to hide. For the first time in her 28 years, Chloe didn't just feel accepted. She felt desired. She felt powerful. Her newfound confidence bled into her professional life. No longer the quiet, shrinking girl who let corporate bullies take the credit, Chloe began dominating the boardroom at Deloitte. She demanded the respect her intellect deserved, and senior management noticed. By autumn, she was promoted to lead forensic auditor and handed the firm's most complex new portfolio, Aegis Global Logistics. It was supposed to be a standard, albeit massive compliance audit ahead of a public merger. But as Chloe dug into the intricate webs of offshore accounts, shell companies and payroll ledgers, the numbers stopped making sense. Sitting in her high-rise office at 11 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday, the harsh glow of her dual monitors illuminated the deep frown lines on her face. She cross-referenced a subsidiary holding company based in the Cayman Islands with a series of massive unexplained cash injections into Chicago real estate. The money was being funneled through phantom vendors companies that existed only on paper billing millions for consulting fees that were never rendered. It was textbook money laundering executed with brilliant, terrifying precision. Chloe's heart began to race. She pulled up the corporate registration for the parent company shielding these ghost vendors. Moretti Syndicated Holdings. The coffee cup slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Dark liquid splattered across her sensible pumps, but she didn't flinch. She stared at the screen, her breath hitching in her throat. Leo. Her mind spiraled into a dark, terrifying abyss. Was any of it real? The spectacular dinner, the immediate connection, the way he had swooped in to save her from Greg's cruelty, or was it all a meticulously orchestrated manipulation? Had the most dangerous man in Chicago identified the senior auditor handling his illicit logistics accounts, stalked her, and manufactured a meet-cute to ensure she would look the other way when the time came? The betrayal tasted like ash in her mouth. She remembered the way Greg had used her, manipulated her, and made her feel small. Now she feared Leo had done the exact same thing, just on a grander, more sophisticated scale. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she printed every ledger, every discrepancy, and every damning piece of evidence tying Aegis Global Logistics to the Moretti crime syndicate. She packed them into her leather briefcase, her tears drying into a hardened resolve. She was not a victim anymore. The private elevator opened directly into Leo's sprawling two-story penthouse overlooking the Chicago River. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed a city oblivious to the storm, brewing inside the opulent living room. Leo was standing by the mahogany bar, pouring a glass of scotch. He turned a warm, genuine smile, immediately breaking across his face at the sight of her. "Chloe mia cara. I didn't expect you until—" His smile vanished the moment he saw her face. She looked like a woman walking to the executioner's block, pale, rigid, and vibrating with barely contained fury. Without a word, Chloe marched to the center of the room and unclasped her briefcase. She slammed a stack of 3-inch-thick financial dossiers onto his custom marble coffee table. The thwack echoed loudly in the cavernous space. "Tell me this is a coincidence," Chloe demanded, her voice shaking, but her gaze deadlocked with his. "Tell me you didn't buy a $30 million restaurant just to get close to the Deloitte auditor who was about to expose your multi-million-dollar money laundering operation." Leo froze. He looked at the files, then back at Chloe. For the first time since she had known him, the unflappable Mafia boss looked genuinely blindsided. "Chloe, what is this?" He stepped forward. but she took a sharp step back, putting space between them. "Don't play dumb, Leo," she shouted, the heartbreak finally cracking her voice. "Aegis Global Logistics, Cayman shell accounts, phantom vendors. I tracked $50 million of dirty money straight back to your holding company. Did you know? Did you know who I was that night at the Wellington?" "No!" Leo roared, the sudden explosion of his voice, rattling the crystal glasses on the bar. He closed the distance between them, ignoring her retreat, and gripped her shoulders gently but firmly. "I swear to you on my life, Chloe. I had no idea you worked for Deloitte, let alone that you were auditing Aegis. I intervened that night because I saw a beautiful woman being torn down by garbage, and it made me want to burn the building down. That was real. You and me, that is the most real thing in my life." Chloe searched his dark, frantic eyes. The terrifying truth was she believed him. The raw panic in his voice couldn't be faked. But that didn't solve the problem. "Then how?" she whispered, a tear finally escaping. "How did I end up with this account?" Leo's jaw clenched. He released her and turned to the files, quickly flipping through the executive summaries. His eyes narrowed, scanning the authorization signatures on the firm's assignment sheets. "Who gave you this specific portfolio, Chloe?" Leo asked, his voice dropping to a lethal, icy whisper. "The regional director," she replied, wiping her cheek. "And the external legal counsel for Aegis requested a forensic team specifically. A lawyer named—" She stopped, the blood drained from her face. "A lawyer named Gregory Tanner." Leo finished for her, pulling a specific document from the pile and tapping Greg's signature at the bottom. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Greg hadn't just been humiliated that night. He had been destroyed. His ego couldn't handle being thrown out by Leo Moretti. He had used his father's corrupt connections to discover who Leo really was. And when Greg realized his ex-girlfriend was dating the head of the Moretti syndicate, he set a trap. "He deliberately routed the Aegis audit to my department." Chloe gasped, realizing the sheer vindictive scale of the plot. "He wanted me to find the dirty money. If I reported it, I would destroy you. If I covered it up to protect you, I'd be committing a federal felony, and he could have me disbarred and sent to prison. It's a checkmate." Leo let out a dark, terrifying laugh. "Greg Tanner thinks he can play chess with me. He's playing with plastic pieces while I own the board." "Leo, this is serious," Chloe cried out. "I have a legal obligation to report these findings by Friday. The FBI will raid your offices. If they find the paper trail, they won't find anything," Leo said, his eyes locking onto hers with absolute, terrifying certainty. He pulled out his phone and dialed Dante. "Dante, initiate protocol burn. Liquidate all Aegis assets offshore, shred the phantom ledgers, and execute the server wipe. I want that company entirely dissolved by midnight." Chloe watched in stunned silence as Leo dismantled a multi-million-dollar operation with a single phone call, sacrificing a massive chunk of his empire without a second thought. "Leo, that's tens of millions of dollars," she whispered as he hung up. "It's just money, Chloe," he said, stepping close to her again, cupping her face in his scarred hands. "I grew up with nothing. I can lose the money. I cannot lose you. I will not let that spineless coward use your brilliant mind as a weapon against us." "But Greg still has the copies of his requests," she said, leaning into his touch despite the chaos. "His father is a judge. They will launch an investigation." A cruel, wolfish smile played on Leo's lips. "Judge Tanner has a crippling gambling addiction. An addiction he funded by borrowing from the Russo family, my rivals. I bought his debt 3 months ago. I have been sitting on audio recordings of a sitting Chicago judge promising favorable verdicts in exchange for debt forgiveness. I was going to use it as leverage, but I think the FBI would be much more interested in a corrupt judge than a dissolved logistics company. Chloe stared at him, fully realizing the depth of the world she had married into. It was dark, dangerous, and ruthless. But as she looked at Leo, she realized he was using that darkness solely to protect her light. Over the next 48 hours, the Chicago elite was rocked by a scandal of epic proportions. An anonymous leak provided the FBI with undeniable proof of Judge Thomas Tanner's corruption. He was arrested in his chambers. The fallout instantly destroyed his son's career. Greg Tanner was fired from his law firm, his assets frozen, and his wealthy fiancée Lexi publicly left him the very next day, taking the Birkin bag with her. As for Chloe, she submitted her audit on Aegis Global Logistics. The report concluded that the company had abruptly dissolved due to internal restructuring, with no actionable financial discrepancies remaining on the domestic servers. It was technically true. 3 weeks later, the Wellington reopened its doors after a lavish renovation. It was no longer a stuffy, elitist establishment. It was warm, vibrant, and welcoming. Chloe sat at the best table in the house, wearing a stunning backless crimson gown that hugged every curve of her size 20 frame. She radiated a fierce, untouchable confidence. Across from her sat Leo, looking at her as if she were the only woman on the planet. He reached across the table, taking her hand and brushing his thumb over her knuckles. "You look incredibly beautiful tonight, Miss Bennett." Chloe smiled, a brilliant, genuine expression of pure happiness. She had walked through the fire of her own insecurities and the shadows of Chicago's underworld, and she had come out the other side entirely unbroken. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti," she replied, raising her glass of 2008 Bollinger champagne. "To us, and to always taking up the space we deserve." Leo clinked his glass against hers, his eyes dark and full of promises. Always. Did Chloe make the right choice by embracing the shadows to protect her peace? Or is true love always a dangerous game of high-stakes chess? If you were in her shoes, would you have exposed the empire or protected the man who stood up for you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of karma, romance and sweet revenge, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more thrilling stories.